Being accountable for our words and actions is a life skill we all need to learn, and it's ongoing. How do we best prepare and mentor our staff to be accountable for all they do throughout the summer? We're about to find out.
You don't lead camp because you love the office. Ultra Camp has everything you need to manage your program so you can spend more time doing what you love. Manage staff, register campers, take payments, and direct communication all in one place.
Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. We have seen a lot of changes in our industry over the last 10 years since our podcasting adventure first began. The landscape certainly looks different as we head into the 2023 camp season, and yet the importance of a well thought out staff training remains the same. This season, we delve into new topics, new ideas for skill development, coping strategies, and ways to support our staff to bring their very best. Yes, the what has certainly changed in the last 10 years, but the why remains the same. And before we jump into today's topic, I'd love to do a round of introductions. So Beth, can you start us off today, please?
Absolutely. I'm Beth Allison, co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a camp consultant and trainer from Woodstock, Ontario, Canada.
New job description name.
I'm a consultant.
That's how efficient she is.
Consulter.
She's trainer and consultant.
All in one.
Consultant. Perfect. Excellent. And Gabrielle.
My name is Gabrielle Rail, and I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Oro. My pronouns are she, her, and Camp Oro, we focus on creating a positive environment for gender minorities.
Excellent. And I'm Ruby Compton. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Chief Exploration Officer for Ruby Outdoors and Training and Support Company in Western North Carolina, though I do work all over the world. Thanks, you both, for being here today. And this conversation is the A word. Man, it is an exciting one. Accountability, and how we get folks to take some accountability for their experiences and other stuff that they bring to camp. So, Beth, I'd love to start off with you sharing any ideas you have about this monster topic. What do we do? How do we get folks to learn this?
How do we do it? So, as always, we have to start off with expectations. During your interview process, your hiring conversations and training, you are making it clear that the expectation is that each and every staff member needs to be accountable for themselves, that this is a job, a huge responsibility, a privilege. And now that you've been clear about this, you have to be prepared to teach them the skills that they need to be able to do that. I think being consistent with your limits and boundaries is key. Every staff member should be held to the same standard, and it happens all the time that we as directors let certain staff away with things for a variety of reasons. We're super stressed and overtired, and we just don't have the time to deal with it. We just happen to get along with some staff members more than others. We might be tempted to be a bit softer on them than others. We see one form of behavior as not quite as serious as others. When we have set expectations up front with staff during training, we need to be consistent in dealing with it, in holding them accountable. If we're not consistent, I find that it breeds jealousy, resentment, anger, frustration. We have all heard the phrase, the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior the leader is willing to tolerate. So we have to hold each staff member to that same standard, and we have to hold ourselves accountable too. And I think another thing we need to remember as directors is it's not our job to solve all our staff problems for them. Our job is not to swoop in and play the hero, but to listen and to empathize when they struggle, to not immediately jump into solution mode. Instead, we need to ask them how they would like to handle the situation, offer to talk it through with them, and follow up afterwards to see how it went. And if they need to discuss with you another approach, because this one just didn't seem to work. And we need to provide the right support for our staff. We have to give them the resources and the knowledge during training, and we need them to know who they go to for support throughout the summer. That needs to be made incredibly crystal clear. If they don't feel set up for success, they are more likely to place blame on others as to why they couldn't achieve their goals rather than holding themselves accountable. So that's kind of where I'd start.
So smart. And I'm just going to throw this book recommendation in because that's been my theme of today.
Yeah.
Is that, not solving their problems for them, but kind of holding their hands and helping them work through that process. The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay-Stanier. I've talked about it a lot on this podcast, but it is a game changer as far as a manager trying to help folks sort through stuff and not just immediately being like, I'm going to fix your problem for you. So check out that book, The Coaching Habit.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, Gabrielle, what are you thinking about on this topic?
I think I love the boundaries piece. Okay. Transparency team. I really struggle with boundaries. I'm still working really hard on it. And I saw this TikTok yesterday that I wanted to send to Ruby because Ruby sometimes helps me with my boundaries or tries to coach me sometimes. And it was titled the people pleasing kidnapped person. Basically, it's somebody in the back seat that was kidnapped, and they're like, hey, is it okay if I like sit this way? Can I just move some of your equipment to the side? Wow, you're so organized. And then being like, would you prefer that I put the gag on? I can do that myself. And it's this whole sort of like how, and it's hilarious. And I was like, that's literally me. My people pleasing skills are very practiced, and it does have an impact on our staff when it comes to boundaries. And I do have a hard time, especially since in a camp director's mindset, the shift of where I'm really supporting campers, and then with staff members, I still have that mind shift that is to support staff members, and we do have to have those boundaries. So one of the ways that I've created a framework for myself to help with that is implementing the ACT program, which we've spoken about on Camp Code. So ACT is really a program that all staff members are required to sign a contract before they come to camp to agree upon. But basically, it's a way of them coming forward when they're aware of an issue, either something that they're not satisfied with, or there's a safety issue, et cetera, communicate it to the right person, meaning you're not necessarily gossiping about it. And then lastly, together we're coming up with a solution. So they're not problem dumping on you. I do want to put in a sentence that when I was developing the ACT program with one of my good best camp friends, her husband was in the vicinity and he chimed in, I appreciated it. And he just said, "You're not responsible for their happiness." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "You're not responsible for their happiness." I was like, "Yes, I am." And he was like, "No, you are not." And we talked about it. And that was something that was really important to me. And that's actually something that we talk about at camp is nobody is responsible for your happiness. Here's the tool. ACT is part of the tool, but it's your responsibility to come forward. It is your responsibility to be aware. This is part of your job. I need this tool because I do have a hard time with boundaries. I will go to ridiculous lengths to support my staff. I do have leadership team members that are around me and other advisors that will guide me. So it's not just all on my shoulders, and make sure that when I'm feeling vulnerable, I'm putting up those boundaries. But ACT program has helped, and also being clear with our staff members that we are not responsible for your happiness, but we are here to problem solve together on how to make the organization better and make your job pleasurable.
So smart. And yeah, that feeds right into what I want to talk about, which is I'll make the connection. Just wait for me. But folks now have been taught that crowdsourcing is how we do everything, right? In the world of the internet, social media crowdsources our feelings. That is, you post something and you wait to see how other people react about it to kind of like figure out how you feel about it. And we post stuff to process and engage in that discussion. And like, that's how we learn. And then we have this tool of the internet where now we are expected, or we have the ability, not expected to, but we have the ability to not only feel things and reflect on ourselves, but broadcast them and get other people involved in that process. So like, we can't be surprised that our staff are coming to us being like, I have this problem, fix it, because that's how they have solved problems for their lifetime. And quite frankly, it is still how I solve some problems when I have house projects. I get on YouTube and I go, how do I fix this problem? Right. And so that
Very
idea,
insightful.
the idea
Mm-hmm.
that they themselves, you are responsible for your experience and you are responsible for your attitude while you're here at camp. That may not be something they've ever heard before or really owned or had a chance to practice. And especially in situations where we are actually like having them put their phones down and really focus and be present. This is new uncharted territory. So there are skills to teach. And I think one of the best systems for teaching this idea of how you interact with those around you and how you make that a great experience and how you manage when things are not fantastic is an old school tool that's been around for a while, which is the fish philosophy. And if you're not familiar with the fish philosophy, it's a training company that uses the philosophy of the people who work in the fish markets in Seattle that are like slinging stinky fish around all day. And they have become this like place that people from all over the country, all over the world go and watch these workers who are like super jazzed about slinging around stinky fish all day. And it's hot and you're like, how could they possibly enjoy this? So there's 4 pillars to the fish philosophy. This was a really common like workplace training management system in, I would say, like late 90s, early 2000s. And I think it is so relevant these days. And their last pillar is choose your attitude. And I remember learning about the fish philosophy and like actually my life becoming significantly better because I was like, oh, I'm in control of a lot of these things. And maybe no one had really told me up to that point that like I'm in the driver's seat on that. So check out fish philosophy. Look at some of the tools. There are free videos out there. You can bring in trainers if you want. But the pillars themselves are so great for camp. They're be there, play, make their day, and choose your attitude. And I think those incorporated into this idea of boundaries, like you can make someone's day without being a people pleaser. Yeah, chew on that for a little while because that's an interesting place to be.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I love it. Choose your attitude and use that fish philosophy as a tool. Awesome. All right, my friends, we're going to stop for a quick break to hear from our sponsor. And when we come back, we'll share some more ideas for training middle management at camp. Exclusive to Camp Code listeners, discover the 10 best marketing tools and tips for camps by visiting ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. You can download UltraCamp's free guide, The Marketing Toolbox. Do you remember why you chose to get into the camping world? UltraCamp knows it wasn't because you loved spreadsheets. That's why they built a platform that's as flexible and affordable as it is powerful so you can keep your program moving forward. They offer transparent pricing that is flexible, which allows you to rest easy and focus on what is most important, your campers. Their pricing has a low minimum entry. There's clear pricing with no hidden costs. They have flexible payment terms and no long-term contracts. In fact, I was just on their website kind of clicking through, and you can just kind of like click options and it'll very simply show you, this is what it's going to cost you. UltraCamp's goal is to help their clients spend less time in the office and more time doing what they love. Want to know if UltraCamp is the right fit for you? You can have a free customized demo session so you can see UltraCamp software in action. Sign up at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. All right, and we are back talking about accountability at camp. So Beth, what are some other ideas you have about how we can get staff to take accountability and understand and mentor under the idea of accountability?
I think that we have to remember we need to address any poor performances as soon as humanly possible. So at an appropriate time and a location, of course, but so you're not to stop the dining hall in the middle of something and address it, but we want to be able to do it as soon as possible. And then try to figure out what is the root cause of that poor performance, whatever they did that you weren't happy with. Did the staff member not have clear instructions? Did they not have enough training? Is there something going on in their personal life? And then I think we also need to take time to reflect on the part that we played in that too. Did we give them too much responsibility too soon? Were we not clear with our instructions or our expectations? Was I or their supervisor not available to give them proper guidance? So ask these kinds of questions, listen, which is hard when we're trying to problem solve. And then create an action plan with that staff member. Do it collaboratively so it feels like a solution and not a punishment. I think we also want to make sure we're setting goals with each staff member at the beginning of the summer for their role, for them personally, and then check in at least halfway through the summer and again as the season is winding down, helping them to see the progress that they're making or the obstacles that may be in the way, allows them to be more accountable for their own actions if they can see that, if you can verbalize that and help them really reflect on that. And then, I mean, this one's just an obvious one for camp people. You need to give consistent and ongoing constructive feedback. If you hold regular check-ins with staff, it makes the tough feedback much easier to give and receive. So honest, open, ongoing feedback is critical for staff to know how they're doing. If somebody fails to deliver in their program or they're part of in the life of the community or whatever, and they lack valid reasoning to justify why, it's important to hold them accountable. And we can forget to make feedback a two-way street that allows staff to share their feedback with us as well. So we need to remember that piece, that it's not just us always giving the feedback. And of course, we say this all the time at Camp Code, embrace mistakes. So staff need to feel safe coming to you after they've screwed up. So we need to create a culture of seeing mistakes as learning opportunities for the future and not reasons to get in trouble. Staff need that confidence to come forward, and it's our responsibility to build that. And finally, for me, two last little but important tips. Don't lower your standards. Be sure to reflect on them every year before the summer starts to ensure that they are fair and reasonable. And once you have them, don't ever lower them or apologize for them. We can't be afraid to confront a staff member and just let something slide. It's never the solution, and it doesn't help camp or the staff member in the long run. And finally, you got to know when it's time to make the hard call. After all the measures are taken and things don't improve in that area of accountability, and we've tried everything to support them, we sometimes need to let them go, because if not, it can start affecting the entire team and your camp's reputation. So firing that underperforming staff member, it's never the solution that directors want to take. I used to do everything to give them more chances, but it does show staff that you will hold people responsible, accountable.
Excellent. Excellent. So many good ideas there. Thanks for sharing all of those, Beth. Gabrielle, what are some other ideas you have for folks?
Hire more, fire more, is what I'm hearing from Beth, and I agree with her so much. So
I hope the women are not listening.
Or they are listening, and it's wonderful. Listen, if you're fired, this is just not the right place for you at this time, this summer, which is what I typically say. But you're not your best self. I can tell. Anyways, for me, I had a wonderful lesson that was taught to me by one of my CIT coordinators years ago. It was opening day. CITs are in charge of, giving the signals to families that are coming in where to park the car. It is a well-oiled machine. I feel like we would pass the fish philosophy test here. It's very exciting. Instead of fish, it's cars that we're passing. But it's grueling work, and we sort of celebrate it in the way that how efficient we are and how kind of exciting it is that we're doing this. And they're 16, so it's kind of fun. There was one of those CITs that had to register for school that day, and so she was in the staff lounge using a computer that was all pre-set up. When the CIT coordinator went to go in and check on her, because it was taking a little bit longer than was anticipated, she was scrolling online instead of doing her registration. And when she talked to this person, she immediately apologized and said, I just need 15 minutes break before I went out there, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll say the CIT coordinator's name, Rihanna. I thought she did one of the best interventions in this space. She said that you taking an extra 15, 20 minutes doesn't impact me at all, because my job isn't impacted by whether you're there or not, but it does impact your teammates. So you're responsible for telling them that you took those 15 minutes. And I felt a little nauseous when she ran that feedback by me. And she did it in a way that wasn't necessarily punitive, but it was just clear communication. And I thought to myself, how many times do I absorb somebody's mistake? How many times do I problem solve with them? Where is the true impact? And I'm not suggesting, and she did it, and she got to choose how she wanted to do it. She, spoke to them individually and said, I did this and I'm sorry, and this is what happened. I think that we have to look at when staff members are not taking accountability and the responsibility seriously. We have to help them reflect on where the actual impact, where is that impact? And truthfully, it doesn't impact me. It might impact the campers, might most likely your teammates. And there's a conversation that needs to be have had. So take that moment and help them see where their impact lies.
Genius. So good. My last tip for today is I recently went to a talk that Dr. Tracy Gaslin gave about mental health, and it was a talk about mesh. And so I was kind of expecting to get a lot of like, this is how you do self-care and take a minute and journal, which are all important things. But she really surprised me when she made this statement that mental health is a whole experience that is a part of every moment of every day that your staff are at camp, and when they're not there too. So if we just think about like, oh yeah, just take a mental health break, like that's not good enough. We have to, just like equity, we have to kind of like weave it into every single piece and moment in camp. And then she went on to talk about the importance of not only dealing with in crisis, but how do we set folks up to be more mentally well and just have better health at camp in general. And one of her big points was to empower them to make decisions, like give them the opportunity by empowering our staff to make decisions. And just like Gabs just described, like kind of like, all right, yeah, handle this the way that you feel it needs to be handled. And then also offering time for them to reflect on how that went and their role in that. And what would you do differently next time? How would you replicate that? I have found some of the best teachers are folks who take that time to reflect on those things. And the organizations that offer that time in community create and foster some of the best educators I've ever seen. And so think about how at camp we can allow folks to make decisions, but also have that space to reflect on it so that they can take ownership of, man, I wish I had done this differently, or, ooh, that was really solid, I want to try that again, or, ooh, I feel like my boss didn't give me this thing, and so if I had had that thing, I would have been more successful. And you can manage that as you need to. Tracy Gaslin is a part of the Alliance for Camp Health. It's formerly the Association of Camp Nurses, but they've broadened that to more broadly camp health. And I think that's really smart. So you can go to allianceforcamphealth.org for some resources there. And they've got some really good stuff going on there too. Any other thoughts on this topic before we head into our recap?
No, I think I'm ready for the recap.
Let's hear it.
Recap. We have 3 columns. Guess what? Directors, staff tool, and resources. And honestly, we typically have so much more staff tools, but this podcast is really for the camp pros that are in charge of staff. And so we're going to start with the tallest column on the shelf, which is us. That's leading this group of people that we want to help teach accountability. So 1, setting expectations, creating consistency when we are dealing with staff members, boundaries, doing that internal work on ourselves and creating that external framework to help support us, reflecting on our personal responsibility when staff members are failing and looking at how can we do a little bit better, creating an action plan, embracing our mistakes and creating that community for our staff members, and keeping those standards high, which I kept to the end because I need to also keep that for myself because sometimes I fluctuate my standards and consistency isn't not my strong suit. So there we go, working on that. Staff members, we can provide them with a couple of tools. Clear expectations. One of the expectations is that you're responsible for your happiness. How do we help support you? When you're aware that you're having a hard time, you communicate it to the right person, and together we're going to come up with a solution. Problem dumping is not acceptable within our organization because nothing gets done that way and we don't learn. Secondly, we want to provide them with feedback as soon as possible. Let your staff members know what that looks like. For me, 72 hours is as soon as possible because we don't know what can happen within that time. Obviously, within the day would be lovely, but set clear expectations on when feedback could be, and also have clear, consistent feedback times that you would have throughout the summer, and help them set goals for themselves. So it helps with a little bit of a perspective check. You want to learn more about creating accountability within your staff? Check out Coaching Habits, as well as the Fish Philosophy and the ACA for more information. There's some great resources out there, including Camp Code.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Gabs. And we want to thank all of you, all our listeners. We would love for you to get involved and tell us your thoughts on this episode by using the hashtag Camp Code. You can also tell us what topics you'd like for us to discuss, any guests that you'd recommend that we have on the show, any great leadership training tips you have to share. We love to hear from you. We are all about sharing in this industry. And if you found this podcast to be useful, please leave a rating and review for us in your podcasting app. Your feedback really helps keep the show going. If you want to be in touch with us, we'd love to hear from you. And Beth, how can folks reach out?
Email beth@gocamp.pro, Twitter @Topaz.
Perfection. And Gabrielle?
info@waro.com and Instagram, Gabrielle Rail with 2 L's.
And you can email me, ruby@rubyoutdoors.com, as well as find me on Instagram @rubyoutdoors. For our next podcast, we will have lots more training tips, and we'll tell you more about that. Got to tune in to find out what the specific topic is going to be. But our final segment today is a best practice for leadership training. And we would love to hear some of your most memorable moments or most effective tips. You can tell us what they are using that hashtag Camp Code. And today's best practice comes from Beth.
If you have listened to any of our podcasts over the seasons, you know that I often find the best way to teach staff about a topic is to get their input and then to think about and discuss what it would be like if they didn't do this topic well. So as part of a larger session I ran a few years ago, I talked to staff about the importance of wherever you are, be all there. And I wrote the following phrase on a whiteboard, and I asked them to fill in the blank with as many ideas as they could. So I wrote, own your own blank. And they gave me things like mistakes, space, attitude, health, drama, conflict, laundry. I mean, they gave me this very long list. And then I put them into small discussion groups and asked them the following question. What does it look like when people do not own their own stuff? So what does it look like when they don't own their own mistakes, their own attitudes, their own health, their own drama, their own responsibilities? And I wanted very specific answers. So we briefly took up some of their answers after they had time to discuss. And they gave me things like, folks leave their laundry in the washing machine all day and forget to put it in the dryer, which messes up the schedule for everybody else. Or people snap at each other, or people feel unappreciated, or folks are forced to carry the load for others and they get more tired and stressed. Or they arrive at program areas and things are broken or lost, or there aren't enough supplies left for their own campers to do the activity, or they have to walk on eggshells when they know 2 staff members are fighting with one another. And then in a large group, I asked them, what falls apart when people don't own their own stuff? And then this was very interesting. So we had a discussion about that and they shared their answers. I asked them, and how does this make you feel? And so I sent them back into their small groups and gave each group one of the items that they put on that list, own your own blank. And I asked each group to come up with the way folks could avoid those pitfalls and be more accountable for themselves. So give your staff time to reflect on issues and come up with some strategies that they will own themselves. And doing that always seems to get a lot more buy-in for me.
Excellent. I love that. And
Wow.
I'm going to use that.
Same. I just wrote that stuff down.
So good. So good. Well, my friends, we're at the end of this episode. Camp Code is a part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. You can check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcast. And there are 7 podcasts in all, each with a different focus to help as many folks as we can. So give them a listen. And from all of us here at Camp Code, thanks for the listening, friends.